Hello there guys, RMP792 here. Sorry about the slightly dodgy lighting, it's quite early in the morning and the sun's, well I think it's up, the rain is making it hard to tell. But yeah, so we're on the artificial lighting today. But let's talk about Captain Marvel. I went to go see it yesterday and I enjoyed it. It's a good film. It's not one of the better Marvel films though. Marvel have managed to get themselves to the point where you can pretty much guarantee a film is going to be good. It's a question of whether or not it does anything interesting to make it stand out from the pack. And I don't think this one does. This is very much a first stage Marvel movie for a character, in that it has pretty much the same problems that most of the other first stage Marvel movies do, in that the villain or the villains are relatively weak. And it spends a lot of time getting the character where they need to be for future stuff rather than letting them be awesome in this particular movie. So if you go into it knowing ahead that it's very, very much an origin movie, and don't set your expectations too high, you're going to have a good time with the movies. I enjoyed this film. But it is very much another Marvel movie. So the things it does do very well. I like Brie Larson as Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. She and Sam Jackson actually have really great chemistry throughout this film, and I'm really looking forward to seeing her interacting with the other Avengers and doing all sorts of cool stuff, which is ultimately what this movie wants to do. I think my biggest problem with this movie is it feels a little bit too short. Not in the sense of, it suddenly ends and you're like, oh, is that it? More in the sense of, I feel, weirdly, it's a very similar complaint to the one I had for the Green Lantern film. It's not that bad. For the record, it's better than that. But one of my biggest complaints about that film was that it felt like the whole thing needed to be about 15-20 minutes longer, and all of that screen time and character development time should have been given to Sinestro. I feel very similar about this. There are two particular things in this film that I think needed a bit more time and a bit more establishment, and if the film had been 15 to 30 minutes longer, and that time had been donated to these two elements, I think it would have been a better film overall. As you might be able to tell, I'm trying to talk initially without going into spoiler territory. But yeah. But overall, it was a good film. I enjoyed it. The effects are great. The performances are good. The script was... it was okay. It was a bit lacking. Again, it's got something like 5 credited screenwriters on it, and that's rarely a good sign. This one does feel a bit more hacked to death by committee than some of Marvel's more recent films. Some of them you could really tell were sort of passion projects for the people directing them or writing them, and this one doesn't quite have the same feel. Ragnarok and Black Panther in particular, you could really feel the style of the director and the writing team, which I think in both those cases the writer and the director were pretty much the same person. I would have to double check that, but I think that was the case. And you could really tell that came through. Here it doesn't so much. The direction's a bit generic. There's nothing really wrong with it, but there's nothing that makes it stand out in an interesting way. There's no equivalent of the shots in Ragnarok where you've got stuff like the Valkyries charging down on their Pegasi, or that moment when Thor leaps into the air with all the lightning arcing around him, and moments like that. There isn't really an equivalent of that, and I think that's a bit of a disappointment. But overall, it's a good, enjoyable film. I just think it could have been more, I think is the best way to describe it. That's pretty much all I can say without going into spoiler territory. So at this point, you have been warned. If you haven't seen the film yet, I do recommend it. Just go in with tempered expectations. And spoiler territory in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the two things I think needed significantly expanding upon. First, I think we needed more establishment of her friendship with can't remember the character's name. Photon, I believe, was her call sign. If you saw it on the side of her plane, her friend from back when they were both pilots. Again, just 10 minutes or so of flashbacky stuff. So we saw little bits and pieces of it. We saw them, getting a drink together. We saw them, drunkenly singing karaoke together, and that sort of thing's good. But that was all in brief little flashes. Rather than moments when we really sort of bond and connect, so that when they meet each other again, it should have been kind of an emotional gut punch, and it kind of wasn't, because that relationship didn't feel like it had been established. And part of the problem was that Carol at that point didn't really remember it. If I'd been in charge of writing this movie, or even just tweaking elements of it, I would have made it so she started to remember her friend a lot more and a lot earlier, and then when they first see each other, that really needed to be a big emotional moment for the pair of them, and it kind of didn't feel like anything at all, which I think was a disappointment, because their actual interactions going on from that are actually really good. You get the sense that these two are friends and have been friends for a long time. It's just that initial moment of really meeting each other, especially after her friend believed that Carol had been dead for several years, should have been an absolute emotional gut punch, and just kind of wasn't. The other thing that I think needed more screen time was Carol's team, the Skrull, not the Skrull team, the Kree team she'd been working with. They were all very much non-entities. The only one who got any real screen time was Jude Law, and it feels like the rest of the team got completely left by the wayside. The only one I can, the only two I can really remember are Gemma Chan, because I've seen her in Humans and she's really good, and quite frankly, she's kind of wasted here. And big blue dude with Santa Claus beard, because he has a cool look. I would have liked to see he has a look that I find very amusing, which I suspect was at least part of the point. And I would have liked to see more of them and establish Carol's relationship with them more before she gets separated from them for most of the film, until they turn up at the end and they're the bad guys. Because I figured that had to happen. We know from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that the Kree are douchebags. And the thing in the back of her neck that was dampening her powers, if you've seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., those things got established in season 5. They stick one of those in Quake, and it basically allows the Kree to shut off her powers whenever they want. Side note, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it actually takes very delicate and very painful surgery to take that thing out. Whereas here, Carol just rips it out. Now, there are two possible explanations for this. One, those scenes in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are set in the future, so they upgrade the tech to make it harder to remove. Or two, Carol is just that goddamn strong and powerful that she can rip it out without any negative downsides. Both of these are possible. Could be one, could be the other, could be a bit of both. And I'm kind of okay with whichever the direction they take it in. You've got wiggle room. Because again, it's reasonable to assume that Kree technology will advance in 50, 60 years. So that's not something I have an issue with. I've seen a few people complain about that, but that's absolutely fine to me. But yeah, the only other members of the team who I'm going to really remember are the ones who are returning characters. So Korath, what was it? Can't remember his title, but yeah, Korath and Ronan, who are of course in Guardians of the Galaxy. And Ronan isn't a member of that team. He's in charge of a bomber fleet called the Accusers, and you clearly recognise one of his ship. The ships that the Accusers use are clearly the ship that he has in Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'll admit, the moment when Carol flies up into space and just wrecks one of them by flying straight through it, and you're just like, whoa, it took the entire Guardians team and a lot of other stuff to even cripple one of those, and they had to do it by boarding it and everything else, and she just blew it the hell up with very little effort. Again, that demonstrates how strong she is, and I like that. That's very much escalation of force, And I do like seeing that in these films. In the same way that Tony's gone from cobbling together a bunch of stuff in a cave to the Mark III suit, and you compare the Mark III suit to the one he's wearing in Infinity War, and it always feels like he's getting stronger and smarter, and his tech's getting more advanced. And the same goes for the others. There's been really good escalation of force across these films to make these heroes feel like they're getting stronger and better. And Captain Marvel being able to mince a battleship like that was a really, really cool moment. But I'm going to be honest, the other main complaint I have about this film, though, is that in most superhero origin films, there is a moment that I tend to think of as the "here I am" moment. It's the time when you see the hero fully become who they are, and 90% of the time in an origin film, that's the best moment in the film. So for Wonder Woman, it's the trench sequence. For the first Iron Man, it's when he first puts on the Mark III suit and goes off to Afghanistan and beats up those terrorists and then almost gets shot down by the friendly planes. For Doctor Strange, it's the moment when he's been fighting with the bad guys, and the cloak for the first time comes down, lifts him up, and he sort of rises up. And then sort of starts spell slinging again, and that's the moment when you see the character on screen for the first time. In the original Superman, it's the sequence where Lois is basically hanging off the helicopter and about to fall, and he changes into the costume, and he flies up and he saves her, and then you've got the extended sequence of him doing a bunch of Superman stuff, fighting crime, saving people, pulling a goddamn cat out of a tree. The problem with this film is that it doesn't really have that moment. Or to be more precise, it has 3 mini moments rather than one big grand one. And that's honestly a lot less satisfying to me. The first one being when she changes the colour of her Kree uniform into from the green and was it a sort of greeny, browny, greeny, blacky, silvery one? You know the one I'm talking about. And she changes that into the red, blue, and gold of the Captain Marvel suit. And yeah, that's a nice little moment, but it feels like there should have been more there. The second one's when she pulls out the implant that's been dampening her powers, and and her eyes glow for the first time, and that's revealing, and again, it feels like more should have been made of the fact that she realised that thing wasn't a... She clearly initially thought that was giving her powers rather than dampening them down. And I think more needed to be made of that. So it was really sort of firmly established that she thought her powers were a gift from the Kree, not something that they were exploiting and clamping down on. And the third and final moment is when she flies for the first time. So again, it felt like there were 3 little moments rather than one big one, and I'd rather have had the one big one. It's more satisfying in the moment, and again, there's nothing wrong with component elements here, but I'm trying to come up with a metaphor that isn't overtly sexual. No, I can't do it. So it feels like it's spreading something out that you just want to be, big one and blast and done. So it's it's ultimately less satisfying, I think, is the problem, spreading those moments out. And that, honestly, those are my biggest complaints with the film. That and the relatively flat direction and the weak music. The music. The soundtrack. I'll freely admit, I'm not a fan of 90s music at the best of times, but there was just something about the way it was mixed in, especially that fight scene where she's actually gone, she's fully come into her powers and she is just kicking the asses of her old team with little to no effort. That music choice felt... Actually, no, to be fair, there's nothing wrong with the music they picked, but the way the audio edited it in, it was alternately drowning out the the sound of the fight sequence and getting drowned out by the sound of the fight sequence. So it just wasn't as satisfying as it should be. So it needed to pick one and go with it. Weirdly, if you want my gold standard for putting music like that over a fight sequence, you look at the original Shrek. I'm not even kidding. The point in that film where Bad Reputation comes on and he's fighting in the wrestling ring, against all the knights. That's weirdly one of my gold standards for how you do that kind of musical cue over a fight sequence. And the original Shrek is a comedy and a goofy movie, but the mechanics of how that's put together are actually really good and really satisfying. And this, I think it was something in the audio editing rather than anything else that I just was not happy with. It just wasn't as satisfying as it should have been. Those are my main complaints about the movie. Now for the stuff I really liked. As I said, Sam Jackson and Brie Larson actually have really good chemistry. And, Nick Fury being effectively the sidekick throughout this movie, I really liked. Because, again, Nick Fury is not a fool. And what he sees here is what leads to him becoming the unflappable badass we see later. This is as much an origin story for Nick Fury as it is for Carol Danvers. And I've seen some people on the internet claiming that this in some way emasculates him or something like that. To which my comment is, do you people know what character development is? This is literally he's a solid, sturdy badass. Because again he's been through the Cold War. He was a full bird colonel in was it the army? He said, or was it the Air Force? Doesn't matter. So he was a full bird colonel, and then he sees something that's way beyond his sphere of experience. He goes to what he thinks is just maybe it's a crashed astronaut or something like that. Or a crashed test pilot or something. Somebody has crashed through the roof of a blockbuster, and 90s reference, ha ha ha. And then so this has happened. So he goes along, and then suddenly there's a woman who can shoot laser beams out of her fists, and a shape-shifting alien shooting at him with ray guns. And he does the only thing he can. He takes it in his stride and says, right, you clearly know more about what's going on than I do, so I'm going to let you take point, and I'm going to learn what I need to know in order to do my damn job. Which is what he does. He spends the entire film figuring out what the solution is to extraterrestrial threat. And the solution is people like Carol. The solution is heroes. Somebody's sitting at his desk at the end of the film working on his proposal for the Protector Initiative. That is Nick Fury coming to the realization that this is what the Earth needs. And that feeds directly into the first Iron Man, which is set, 5 to 10 years after this? At which point he's ready to basically, he's spent years working his way up the totem pole to the top of S.H.I.E.L.D., where he can start putting together this plan he's come up with. So, Nick Fury is as much a badass as ever. He's just a badass who's using his brain, which is what Fury has always done. He's a man who comes up with contingency plans, and this is a situation where none of his contingency plans will work because he never, as he said, he's been planning to deal with enemies all his life. He just never expected them to come from up there. So, he goes away and he thinks, okay, here's what we need to do. And he starts working on it. And I'll be honest, I've seen a few people saying that it's really cheesy that he was going to call it the Protector Initiative. And then, he looks at the photo of Carol. And when he did that, I sort of looked at it and went, oh, so that's what her call sign was. And I realised her call sign was going to be Avenger. And I've heard some people say it was cheesy. I liked it. I actually really do like that. Because again, in the original comics, them calling themselves Avengers is literally just Wasp came up with it and everybody else thought it sounded cool. They're literally just saying, we'll need some sort of team name. What should it be? And they start spitballing a few ideas. And Wasp throws out the Avengers, and Tony Stark is just like, yes, that is it. That is what we shall call ourselves. And everybody else pretty much goes, yeah, all right, why not? But here it's more, it's a reminder of the person that inspired him to create it, and I like that. Again, did it need to be in the movie? No. Was it a cute nod? Yeah, I liked it. Then again, I'm the weirdo who still thinks that Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3 could have been really great movies. Because again, the problem with them is that they don't know who their main character is, and the main character is Palpatine. He is, or he should have been, is the better way to describe it, because he's the one who wins. I don't say Palpatine is the hero of the prequel trilogy, but he should have been the main character in that regard. But yeah. Anyway, let's not get into Star Wars now. But yeah, that is actually I thought it was a cute nod, and I really liked it. It gave me a little tingles up the spine because I'd been assuming throughout most of the film that her call sign was going to have turned out to be Marvel in the first place. But the fact that it was Avenger, I'm cool with this. I liked it. The whole he got his eye damaged because the cat scratched it. I can kind of understand why that upset some people, but at the same time, I actually quite like the fact that Coulson comes in and he's like, "So is it true that the Kree burned your eye out because you wouldn't give them the location of the Tesseract?" And Coulson and Fury's just like, "I can neither confirm nor deny that." And again, technically he's not lying, but he appreciates the value of a good story and the value of giving people inspiration and hope and something they can believe in. And that's all he's really doing there. He's not doing it to because he's embarrassed about how it happened. He's doing it because it actually helps other people to believe that story about him. But yeah, and the cat, Goose the cat. I knew there was something up with that cat from the moment it turned up. Because why was it in the secret research facility and and it just kept kind of hanging around. I wasn't quite expecting the tentacles. Yeah, that was a bit creepy. So the question is, are they implying that all Earth cats are secretly tentacle monsters? Or is that meant to be, or was Goose something that Marvel brought with her to Earth and presumably, gave to Carol as a gift? My money would be on the latter, but honestly, I find the idea that all cats are secretly nightmare monsters that want to eat you kind of hilarious. So I'm going to go with that as my personal headcanon. But yeah, Goose the cat was a lot of fun. Again, Sam Jackson just getting distracted, going, "Oh, kitty." It was cute. I liked it. I'm sorry. I'll freely admit, I'm more of a dog person than a cat person, but cats are adorable as well. All fluffy creatures need a good need a good stroke. But arguably the most interesting thing this film did, which I didn't see coming, was casting Ben Mendelsohn as the leader of the Skrulls. Okay, I saw that coming because I knew he was in the film, but casting him as the Skrull leader was a really good choice because he's been playing a lot of villains recently. He's in Rogue One. He was in that recent Robin Hood film, I believe. He was in Ready Player One, which I still haven't seen because I don't know, for whatever reason I just couldn't muster up the energy to give a damn about Ready Player One. But anyway, but Ben Mendelsohn has been playing a lot of bad guys and playing them very well. So when he was in this, I assumed he was going to be the bad guy, and that's what the film makes you think for about the first half to 2/3. And then when you realise that the Skrulls are effectively just refugees, trying to get the hell away from the Kree, that's a really good bait and switch. I actually really like that. That was a good good thing to do with the Skrulls. And I've seen quite a few people complaining that they were waiting for the big shocking reveal moment where the Skrulls turn on them. And no, I actually think the Skrulls are a much more interesting race when they're not just generic shape-shifting bad guys, when they are a race. So there are some good Skrulls, some bad Skrulls. As I can't remember the character's name, as Ben Mendelsohn says, this is a war. His hands are not clean, not in the slightest. But everything he's done has been to protect his family. And that's something that a lot of people who have been to war can absolutely relate to. They did it to protect the ones they care about, but that doesn't mean that they're going to sleep well at night. With some of the stuff that they had to do. And that's always an interest. That I always find that fascinating aspect of any war story narrative, and I'm glad they went there with this. But the fact that these Skrulls are not evil does not prevent them doing secret wars or anything like that in the future. Where it turns out that there are some Skrulls who are bad guys because again, they're a species. Is every human good? Is every human evil? No. We exist on a spectrum, and frankly, having a race that's entirely evil is just a bad idea. It doesn't work narratively speaking. It doesn't make sense. You need villains, and if you're doing an alien species, you need some of them to be good, some of them to be bad, or some of them to be doing bad things for what they consider to be the right reasons. And again, this is where I think they could have tied it a lot more into Carol's team. Give them a lot more motivation for why they chose to enlist in the Kree army or the Kree Special Forces or whatever this group is. Have them basically say that somebody they love was hurt in a previous conflict the Kree had with somebody else. So they joined up because they wanted revenge, or have big beardy guy mention that he's got a wife and kids at home and he doesn't want them to get hurt and killed by the Skrulls. Again, there's a lot of places you could have gone with it to make that team more interesting, and their lack of screen time screws them over in that regard. So or even set up Korath was it Korath the Pursuer? It's something like that. Set up Korath's motivation for later on why he goes and joins Ronan when Ronan basically defects from the Kree Empire because he's annoyed that they've made peace with Xandar. So set him up having a particular hatred of Xandarians or something like that. So, again, there's lots of things you could have done that they didn't, and I think that's the main problem I have with this movie. There are lots of good parts of this movie, and the whole is fine, but it feels like there's a lot more that could have been done. And the other real element of this film was the relationship between Jude Law and Carol Danvers. And again, was he Yog something or other, I think, was his character name? I can't remember it. So I'm just going to keep calling him Jude Law. And again, I kind of knew right from the get-go that he was clearly the villain. Jude Law was in arch-villain mode the entire film, and I'd have reined that in if I was the director. I'd have basically got him to play it a little more subtle and less obviously bad guy. In this, he was in a fairly similar mode to how he was in King Arthur, which, for the record, I like that King Arthur movie. I genuinely do. I think it's a fun movie. But Jude Law was overacting the bejesus out of it in that, and he's kind of doing the same thing here. If I was the director, I'd have told him to tone it back a bit, make it less obvious that he's the bad guy until that big twist. You could tell immediately that he was the villain, and I think that's to the film's detriment. But I'll freely admit, I like the sequence at the end where he basically puts away his weapons and says, fight me, and she just blasts him across the room and goes, I have nothing to prove to you. Yes, exactly. That to me was quintessential. You have to do this on my terms. To which the response is, no. I'm not going to lower myself to your level. I am better than you. Why should I fight with one hand tied behind my back? This is the epitome of people online who yell, oh, well, you should debate me. To which the response is, no, because your ideas are stupid and not worth debating. Whenever you get into an argument with a flat earther where they say, oh, you have to do that, you have to prove that I'm wrong. To which the response is, okay, here's some proof. And they always just bullshit their way through it. So some people are just not worth fighting on their own terms. You use what you have to your advantage. I'm perfectly fine with that. And the audience, I was in a moderately busy screening. It was quite early in the morning yesterday. But weirdly, it was an audience of mostly old women. or middle-aged to old is what I would say. A lot of them look to be north of 50, I would say, which I found very interesting. I wouldn't have. It's not what I would consider the typical demographic for a superhero film, but maybe that's kind of the point. These are people who've been waiting their entire lives to see something like Carol Danvers on screen. Same goes for Wonder Woman. But again, when I saw Wonder Woman, that screening was almost completely deserted because again, I like going to the cinema as early as I possibly can. Preferably first screening of the day because it tends to be a bit quieter. And with all due respect to the general public, you're all monsters. I do not like sharing a cinema with you. This is the problem. I was raised. I go to the theatre quite a lot, and theatre has etiquette. You turn up. You don't bring your giant thing of popcorn. You don't bring your giant your giant soda or anything like that. You turn up. You watch the performance. You keep your mouth shut, and you leave. People in cinemas, pulling out their phones and stuff and checking Twitter halfway through the film. Anyway, I'm not going to go on to a rant about cinema goers, but yeah, it was an audience with quite a few middle-aged women, and they pretty much bloody cheered when she just blasted him across the canyon. They really enjoyed that, and yeah, I get why. It's clearly that attitude of, yeah, screw you. So this film ultimately I enjoyed, but I felt could have been more. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with Carol Danvers in Infinity War. Not Infinity War, in Avengers Endgame. I think she could be really cool there. And I'm just, yeah, it was a good, enjoyable time of the movies. But I definitely feel like they could have done more with it. I think the problem was this one didn't really feel like one person's vision, or a small, or something like the Russo brothers who work together really, really well. This felt a little more designed by committee, and again, the fact that it's got about 5 credited writers, I think, is part of the problem. That's rarely a good sign for a film, and this does feel like a. Oh, I forgot to talk about Mar-Vell, didn't I? Yeah, Mar-Vell's female in this. It transpires that the scientist who was designing a sort of super, a very advanced drive for a new aircraft, is Mar-Vell, the Kree who defected from the Kree Empire, and yeah, I'm fine with this. Mar-Vell was not really an interesting character. Mar-Vell was created because Marvel wanted to snap up the rights to the Captain Marvel name, and kept alternately getting cancelled and coming back so they could hang on to the rights for the best part of 40 years. Until Mar-Vell died, and fully passed the mantle of Captain Marvel on to Carol Danvers, didn't really do much interesting. So yeah, I quite like the portrayal of Mar-Vell in this film. She's fun, she's interesting, and when she dies, and then Carol basically attempts to destroy the drive, and as a result gets flooded with the energy of the Tesseract. I thought that was a good moment. So yeah, overall it was a good film that I think would have been I think it would have benefited from being a little more focused and being about 20 to 30 minutes longer. But let's face it, as a general rule of thumb, when my biggest complaint is your film is too short, that's not that's not a bad sign. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of her. I'm hoping they can do something cool and interesting in the sequel. In particular, I'd love to see some full-on outer space adventures doing cool stuff. Oh, and the costume, I like the way they do her helmet with the mohawk. I like that. That was a nice touch. Well done, whoever came up with that idea. That was fun. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much all I've got. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future videos.